Avengers Endgame is an emotional and satisfying ending to this long and storied phase of the cinematic universe. The premise is essentially living after Thanos snapped half of existence straight to Belize, coping with loss and trying to find a way to undo the snappage. Our heroes who survived are all in very different places following the aftermath. Some are lost in more ways than one, others have actually found ways to cope and move on, and then there are those who just refuse to give up on the fight. And for the most part, each Avenger was given their fair due, though I was kind of missed with how some of their journeys played out. Those who loved the badass Thor in Infinity War might be a bit disappointed because now he's back to comedic butt monkey Thor with a touch of Lebowski syndrome. And without spoiling anything, one character's story felt a bit abruptly concluded. It works for the story, but given the character, it's hard not to think that they deserved a little bit more. But as has always been the case, the real stars of Avengers Endgame are Tony Stark and Steve Rogers, both of whom have incredibly poignant and satisfying journeys. The story goes a long way towards really paying tribute to these two in particular, not just as leads in this film, but as characters in general. The acting's always been reliably great, but both Robert Downey Jr. and Chris Evans knock it out of the park this time. Don't get me wrong, it's not like Heath Ledger in The Dark Knight or Hugh Jackman in Logan, but these two really bring their A-game to sell the desperation and nervous sliver of hope. In fact, everyone gives a great performance all around. Best yet, their arcs ended up genuinely surprising me. By now I've come to know what to expect out of these movies, and some of what I expected would happen did happen. However, the Russo brothers really did a great job of creating a film that could genuinely catch me off guard at moments, and leave me grinning like an idiot a lot of the time. Anytime a comic book movie of all things can surprise me is a moment to be revered. Endgame's a 3-hour movie, but it didn't feel like 3 hours. Despite its somber nature, it's still loaded with laughs, great witty banter, tons of great action set pieces, and really satisfying crowd-pleasing moments. Even Nebula's dry, deadpan responses to buffoonery managed to really be amusing. In fact, this is the film that finally made me actually like Nebula as a character. Lord knows Guardians 2 didn't do that. The writers know when to keep things serious and when to have fun, so it's not just a grim and miserable ride all film long. And because of the movie's ridiculously long runtime, we end up with a lot of actual setup prior to the movie really kicking into gear. To some, that could be a bad thing because it means a good chunk of the film goes without any action whatsoever, but like with The Dark Knight Rises, that initial setup is important to really stew in a world after Thanos. It allows us to get a sense of what's really become of the world and everyone left still standing. It's nice to have a breather and really stew in these characters dealing with loss and coping in their own respective ways. Granted, the plot itself is kind of a head scratcher. It's yet another instance where a lot of the time I found myself asking, wait, why can't they do this? Why aren't they allowed to bring back that? You need to have an established set of rules for these sorts of things to actually make a degree of sense. And the scene trying to establish these rules while funny is kind of half-ass. As if to say, who cares, just shut up and enjoy the ride. And I mean, I did, but it makes it a little harder to fully appreciate when things happen, and I'm constantly asking if they need to happen the way they do, and why some things were at all irreversible. But whatever, this is a comic book film. The main focus is either on characters or spectacle. And on the subject of spectacle, the action itself is as great as it's ever been in an Avengers film. I maintain that the gold standard of action in MCU movies is Winter Soldier, since the fights were practical and focused. But for a film so largely reliant on CG, it all manages to feel really coherent and well choreographed. The battles with Thanos are great, the large-scale action set pieces are tense but left me grinning from ear to ear, something I normally don't do since the larger scale battles are always my least favorite part of any Avengers film, but somehow Endgame found a way to shake it up and keep it focused on something different for a change. And as with any great comic book movie, you need a great villain, and Thanos still delivers on that. Thanos isn't in the film nearly as much as he was last time, and he's a bit more villainous this time around, but there's a practical reason for that. In his head, he's still the hero of his own story. His more villainous mindset comes as a direct result of the journey at hand, realizing that to truly achieve what he desires, he has to adapt. Josh Brolin once again gives Thanos a quiet, calm menace, and he truly feels like the most dangerous villain in the whole series. In action, he kicks the collective ass out of every single person who comes across his fist and his blade. And with each encounter, there's real weight because you honestly can't tell if the person Thanos is fighting will even survive. Not just because of the finality of Endgame, but because of how brutal Thanos is. The journey really does evoke a sense of nostalgia, revisiting characters and places we haven't seen in a while, taking us on a kind of trip down memory lane. It harkens back to all those times in the theaters when we watched these films for the first time, and it's hard not to feel good about that. After all, this film is the culmination of 11 years worth of comic book movies. And while it stumbles at a few points, namely when it comes to the finite details of the story and the way some characters feel sidelined, the end result is a film that delivers as an absolute kick-ass blockbuster flick, with all the action, humor, crowd-pleasing moments, and feels you could possibly ask for. It's also a film that gives comic book movie fans and moviegoers alike a truly satisfying ending to this MCU journey. Endgame isn't the best comic book movie I've ever seen, it's not even in my top 5 MCU films, but it's easily the best Avengers film I've ever seen and certainly one of the most satisfying MCU films out of the lot. And so I'm giving Avengers Endgame an 8 out of 10. The film was everything I thought it was going to be, and while shaky at points, it still managed to be a truly fitting conclusion, one that leaves me very curious what the next wave of films will be like. So without spoiling anything, how'd you like the 4th Avengers film? Did it meet your expectations, exceed, disappoint? Whatever your thoughts, let me know in the comments below. If you like this review, maybe consider subscribing. I'll be covering more films, both popular and old alike, as things go along. Anyway, thanks for watching. Also, technically speaking, this is the first time the Avengers were actually avenging people.